What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now, Back to the Past. I'm Alex. In this video, I thought we would take a look at Spider-Man 2002, just titled Spider-Man, right? Coming from Treyarch under Activision. This was right at the time that Treyarch was obtained by Activision and kind of became theirs. And oh my God, what a game. There's quite a few things I want to talk about with the game itself, but there's also some kind of behind the scenes, some of like the more trivia-like things for the game that I find to be very interesting. And at times, I find to maybe be more interesting than the game itself. I want people to know very, very clearly, I went from Spider-Man 2018, Marvel Spider-Man 2018. I went from that game to this game. You might be asking, why wouldn't you have just done it in order of release? That would have been a good idea. Start with this game, do 2018, and then do Miles, because what I'm about to do is actually play Miles after this game. And oh my God, I mean, it's quite a downgrade, but it's got something special to it, right? And I kind of want to make that the theme of this video. I'm really not here to play around and pretend like this game is any good. I know people do, I think, genuinely like this game. I'm gonna have to take the opposite approach throughout this video and say I really, this game frustrated me to no end. I think there's a lot of things in this game that are extremely bad. I recognize the era. I recognize the year that this game came out, and I'm not trying to hold it up to like modern day, but if we're looking at it in modern day and looking back, how do I feel about it? Well, some things I do think have aged fine, and I think are actually kind of cool, and other things really, really got to me last night in my time when I'm recording this, when I was playing this game. I really got frustrated at times. So let's talk a little bit about the history kind of first, then we'll talk about my opinions on the game itself. So this game released, like I said, in 2002, but it released in April, at least in North America in 2002. It released, I believe, in June in Europe. So this was one of those games, much like with Star Wars Revenge of the Sith, and I love the era of this kind of thing happening. I've talked about it before with Revenge of the Sith, where this would never fly nowadays, right? A game releasing, in this case, the game released about 2.5 or so weeks before the movie, before Sam Raimi's Spider-Man came out, this game released. And same thing for Star Wars Revenge of the Sith, that game released early. And it's like, to have played the game, if you got a day one, and, with this game, it's not to the extreme that, like, Star Wars was. Star Wars had the movie in the game, and it went through very detailed, I would say, what happens in the movie. You would know the entire plot, and it did a really good job in retelling it. This game certainly condenses it. It leaves out a lot of things. Aunt May maybe being one of it. It cuts to after Uncle Ben has already died. You start the game looking for his killer, right? So there are huge, huge gaps. There's also extra things. Shocker, Vulture, Scorpion, and then also Kraven if you have the Xbox version, right? Now, I played on PlayStation. I do want to open the box or show you guys the box as this video goes on, but again, just a little bit of history first. So I like this era. I really like the idea that you could have played the game before the movie, and in this case, would you have known all that much? You would have seen like Green Goblin's big introduction. You would have seen a little bit, I suppose. You would have been able to see the finale, I guess, with Green Goblin dying in a different way. But really, a lot of the movie, I guess, would have been not shown. So, thinking about it now, it's cool, but at the same time, playing the game, I don't think would have given away too much of the actual movie. But there's a lot of trivia with this game. I think one of the things that obviously makes this game very, very unique and very, very cool, well, number one, there's a lot of cheat codes. Now, cheat codes were not all that uncommon back then, but the amount of them, there are quite a few playing as all different things. I played part of this game as Shocker. Obviously, there's just Spider-Man. You can play as Peter Parker. There's many of them out there, a police officer, but there's also the Green Goblin mode. And this, there was actually an interview done with one of the creators of this game that kind of went into detail. Sam Raimi didn't like that mode. They pitched it to Activision, they pitched it to Sony, and they pitched it to Sam Raimi, and it got through the other two pretty okay, but Sam Raimi had a problem playing as the villain unless you could kind of make it work. He didn't like being able to play as the villain, but they made it work. They used new lines. The interview had talked about how this was kind of a last second thing. There was an engineer that figured all this stuff out, and he pitched it to him right towards the end, so they had to like write lines on the weekend. They had Josh Keaton, who was originally going to be Peter/Spider-Man, and then Tobey Maguire came in, so they used him for Harry Osborn, and they had him do the Green Goblin lines. And that's kind of fascinating too, right? So like a person that would eventually become Spider-Man, down the line in all sorts of different things. He was originally Spider-Man, kind of kicked out because of Tobey, and then he went and he did Harry Osborn. Willem Dafoe obviously playing Green Goblin. And another pretty interesting thing, I know, the Bruce Campbell thing is pretty well known, that Bruce did the tutorials, and he read the script, but he also, I think, ad-libbed. And I want to talk about the tutorials in general because they are quite fun. I think overall, again, you just don't see that kind of stuff nowadays. But it's pretty interesting that they said Tara Strong was actually brought in. She did the lines first. So you kind of feel bad because it's like some of these people's lines were kind of just tossed. I think Tara Strong is a fantastic voice actor. So, her kind of being kicked out for Bruce Straley is, a little upsetting. But at the same time, we got some legendary stuff. And it became, obviously, a thing. We know Bruce Campbell's link to Sam Raimi in general. And then I believe Bruce Campbell did this for the Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3 game as well. So pretty cool overall. And then really the rest of it in terms of, lore and like the canon, of this game, it's hard. I'll be flat out honest. It's very hard to kind of put myself back there in 2002. I was 6 years old, not even. I guess I would have been turning 6 when this game came out, and I didn't play it. So my history with Spider-Man games was Spider-Man 2, and I feel like I had it on PC. I really hope Spider-Man 2 came out on PC. Otherwise, I don't know what game I'm thinking of. But early Spider-Man games, it was really just Spider-Man 2. I either played or I watched people play like the whole Web of Shadows and that kind of like arc, I guess, Edge of Time, right? I never owned any of those games. That's a huge mistake nowadays because Edge of Time and Web of Shadows and Shattered Dimensions, those games are $100+ each, really. If you have those games, you are lucky. I'll buy it off of you for a cheaper price if you allow it. But no, I mean, these games are very, very expensive. This game is not. This game is worth probably an average of like $10 to $15. This is readily available. And remember, the PS2 version, no Kraven missions. The Xbox version did have it. The history there is they kind of knew that was going to happen as they were early developing the Kraven missions. They got the call saying, hey, make it for Xbox. Things about like the movie tie-in, the nature of this game being a movie tie-in. They knew right away this was going to be a movie tie-in game. They struggled with the script a little bit, right? Because some things in the movie, they're so big in scale and they had to kind of like dumb it down a little bit. And then also, when you're going around with Peter, like there's dialogue that's also not in the movie. So some things they kind of wanted to be in the script so they could use it, weren't. And then some things that were in the script they couldn't really use because it was kind of too much. So pretty interesting in terms of development. I think it was developed in under 2 years, I think a year and a half or so. It took them to make this game, and then it released, and it did really well. The game, well, it did well at least commercially, so selling-wise. The game sold over 2 million units in the first 4 years. Pretty darn good. That's a lot of revenue, I guess. Even back then, even right now, if you have a game that sells 2 million, especially if it's smaller, that's fantastic, right? And the reception, actually was pretty okay. You look across the board, the Metacritics of the world, and they're all like 75, 76. You're not talking about the 80s. You're not talking about 90s. This game wasn't like the greatest game of all time, but you're also not talking about like the 60s and 50s. And this was really kind of referred to as the best Spider-Man game at the time. Now, it was going to get beaten many, many times, and I think many games after it would do things better kind of individually than this game did. And this game is important. This game is definitely important. And again, there are some things in this game that are pretty okay, and we'll talk about that in a second. So what I want to first do is I want to show you the game. If I have games, physically, I like to try to kind of show them off. So I just got this actually in early July. I went to a game store, retro game store, got the game. You see the back of it. Honestly, it looks really, really good. I mean, visually, and some of the cutscenes in this game do look pretty excellent. I actually have my memory card in here. This is one of the only games that has this little thing. So got the memory card, got the manual, and then obviously got the disc. And the manual is pretty important. It's not all that, like, it's not colorful. I would have preferred it to be in color, especially back in 2002. But it goes through quite a bit, kind of talks to you through the controls. And again, that was something like putting myself back in that environment. It's like, yeah, this was the era where, the tutorials, I mean, Bruce Campbell does an okay job, don't get me wrong there, but no, I mean, just what you actually do in this game, how you play the game, a lot of it is told through manuals. It's not really told through the game. You don't have this massive tutorial course to go through it. You get a little bit of story in here. You get a little bit of the controls in here, a little bit of the backstory, stuff like that, and then you just jump on in. So I played the game from beginning to end, played a little bit of the Green Goblin mode as well, so I could talk about it a little bit. And again, I wouldn't say I like this game. I think I can respect it for what it did, but I don't think I necessarily like it. So let's talk about the game itself. So I think visually we should maybe start there. There are some, like the cinematics in this game are actually pretty good. There's not too many of them. There's maybe, I can think of like 3 off the top of my head. Maybe there's like 5 or 6. And I mean like the better visuals, kind of what the game starts with. There's a few kind of peppered in throughout the entire game. But overall, yeah, I feel like it's definitely under 10. And I want to lean more towards that like maybe 4 to 7 range. But when it's firing on that, and now that's a different studio. They had somebody else handle those kind of cinematics. The in-game cinematics were handled by Treyarch themselves, but everything else was done by somebody else, and they did an incredibly good job. Game looks pretty good. Even, like, I say it. Okay, 2002. This game came out in 2002. We're in 23, right? So 21 years later. Do I think it like holds up or stands up? No, but it doesn't look nearly as bad as like you would think it does. Those kind of big cinematics, they actually look pretty okay. Like they're easily tolerable and they look pretty cool. Okay, the in-game stuff, yeah, obviously that hasn't aged nearly as well. It does look pretty fine. Like when you're going around, I think outside is this game's like best thing. I think generally, even with like mission structure, I think it does the best when it's kind of a little bit more open. When you fight Green Goblin several times in this game, when you have to fight his like the pumpkin kind of bombs or whatever, when you're doing that and or Vulture, I guess the chase with Vulture, fighting Vulture, when you're out in the open and you got a little room to maneuver, I think this game is at its best, primarily because the camera is abysmal, much like a lot of games were. I think to like Kingdom Hearts, and obviously that camera in Kingdom Hearts 1 was absolutely awful, but camera is really bad and controls are really bad. So he'll do like a weird kind of pivot thing. How Peter or how Spider-Man actually turns around is very, very bad. He can get in some pretty bad situations. He'll do things you don't want to do. It's very frustrating when it comes to stealth missions because it is cool, the whole shade or, being undercover versus being in the light and the icon kind of representing that. That's cool. Climbing on like the ceiling over guards, like around them, I actually think is pretty clever, and it's actually used far more than Marvel Spider-Man 2018 didn't even do stuff like that. Now, it used stealth, but in a different way. This game literally used more wall crawling or on the ceiling. 2018 kind of used like perch points and kind of like going from one area to the next to do stealth takedowns and stuff. Obviously, that was not available in this game. Again, it's a pro con. I think at times, it's cool, the mechanic. The actual mechanic of doing it is pretty cool. But to get to the wall, to get to the ceiling is really bad. And if you get caught, good luck. The game is pretty difficult. I played the game on medium, and I actually very much wish I played it on easy. I played the Green Goblin mode on easy, and you could immediately kind of tell. I don't know if there's less enemies. I couldn't like get a head count of them when I was doing Green Goblin, but they clearly do less damage to you, and I just feel like it's just easier to take them out. At least for me, I much prefer to play this game on easy than I do medium because again, there are some things that are in your control that you can do to kind of get better. I think, too, maybe even the first major fight, which is Uncle Ben's killer with the shotgun, that was very difficult, but it's because I kind of didn't know what I was doing. You got to use more, like, high attacks, like jump on him. I think sometimes there's collision where if Spider-Man lands on something, you do damage immediately just by kind of landing on them, so you can kind of use that to your advantage. You can beat him up and then kind of, like, run away again. I think you're actually supposed to kind of hide from him more. I didn't even do that. I just kind of used elevation to my benefit. And the first time I did it, I got blasted. I got destroyed. So there's some things that you can do. There's other things that are just really, really annoying. I think to the Shocker mission underground when he's shooting the, whatever you want to call them, the waves, the electrical waves at you, and you have to kind of not even jump. I tried to jump. I more or less ran in between the tunnels. I thought that mission was abysmally bad. And there's several of the missions are really, really bad. I think, again, it's at its best when it lets you kind of be free and kind of just go around and swing. And again, like chasing Vulture, I think was pretty okay. Even fighting Vulture, fighting Green Goblin, they're not super aggressive. So you can kind of play it from far, use your webs, which I think once I got the hang of it, the webs are pretty okay. They're kind of cheap like hits, specifically on bosses. I actually found myself using webs on bosses, or at least some bosses like Green Goblin, far more than I use them on enemies. Certain enemies can get out of it. Even some of the villains, I believe, can get out of it, and it's not even worth using it on them. But that's where the game, I think, shines. And sadly, most of the missions, I feel like, are indoors, and some of them are kind of more crammed than others. Again, it's not really a good time when you do that. Don't want to spend too much time. Like, there's not... Look, the thing is, there's a lot of missions, but they're very short, right? These missions can last anywhere between 5 to 15 minutes. There are some missions that I do think took me 5 or 6 minutes. There's some missions that'll take you a bit longer. If you know what you're doing and know where to go, like I had no idea, right? And sometimes I forgot that there was even a map in this game, or like I guess a compass. There's a compass in the bottom right corner, right? I oftentimes forgot that existed, so I was going around having no clue what I was doing because I forgot that was there. If you know what you're doing, if you know what key you're looking for, or that you need to find a key, or whatever, a valve, or whatever it may be, you can, I think, go through this game extremely fast. I think there's like 25, 26 missions in the entire game, maybe a little bit less. I think with Kraven, maybe it makes it that. And again, that's the Xbox version. I don't have that. I did watch somebody play the Kraven thing. Looks pretty okay. I don't know if I would want to play it. I think I'm actually more fine with watching somebody else do it. But, it's got a lot of missions. The thing with the missions is it spends a lot of time on Green Goblin. Like, once you get to that arc, that kind of is the entire arc. The beginning, like the first half of the game, is more everybody else. So you get Uncle Ben's killer, you get Shocker, you get Vulture, you get all these characters, you get Scorpion. Scorpion's pretty unique. I think I really like actually fighting with Scorpion. I think that's kind of cool. You'll fight with different people in this game, but you do get to fight with Scorpion at one point, and then that doesn't last very long, right? But he's very cool. That's a cool cutscene with Scorpion. I think just his character model looks really cool as well. Vulture, I actually really liked Vulture. Both the sound, some of the acting, like I don't even think I talked about that yet. Like, okay, Willem Dafoe is pretty okay. Toby, I actually think, is pretty good too. There are some like cheesy lines. There's some like there's either outrageous lines that happen, or there's also outrageous stuff that happens. Like the guy on the phone as the thing is about to fall on him, and it's like, why are you standing there? Number one, why is there nobody else there? There's like one person there. And number two, why are you on the phone just standing there ready to get crushed? So that guy really needs to pay attention more, which I think he actually says to him in the game. Some of those lines are actually pretty okay. Some of the lines that the enemies say, they only have like 3 or 4 lines, and they're as corny or as cheesy as you can possibly imagine. I kind of don't mind them, but it is actually interesting that Toby does a pretty good job. I think the voice quality of him, of Willem Dafoe, Vulture definitely stands out, I think, as being one of the best ones as well. And there's other ones that are not good, like, whatsoever, but they're more like secondary characters that you don't, I guess. Like, MJ is pretty terrible, but like I think she talks twice, so it's like it's not too big of a deal. Overall, it's definitely a ride. It's not really a long ride. It doesn't take that long, and like I said, I mean, you can go back and play it at different difficulties. There's like a pinball mode. There's things to unlock, obviously, right? There's a movie. There's Green Goblin mode, and Green Goblin, you just go through the entire game, right? They remove, I believe, all of, if not most of, the cutscenes. So there's none of that, but you just replay the levels, and they add the dialogue in the gameplay. So you'll be talking, in the game, which I think is actually quite clever, right? You're at the end, your watch is dinging, you got to release the game, and you came up with this idea to play basically the entire game as Green Goblin on the glider, which I think is like he controls better than Spider-Man, okay? Spider-Man, the web swinging is... You can kind of get it sometimes. I just don't like the idea that if you hold on to whatever it is, like R2, where he's swinging, he'll always climb himself up. So it's actually probably best for that to like, and what I did is I would do a web and then I would let go and press X to have him kind of jump. It's the closest thing I could get him to do to get momentum, which is done so well obviously later on, and in Spider-Man 2018, which I just played, right? He does flips. He organically goes into the next swing as long as you time it right. You can get his arching just right to do some, I guess, to gain momentum and be very, very fast. There is none of that here. The best you can hope for is kind of just doing one web, jump, do another. If you just hold it, you're not going any faster, and he kind of just climbs upwards into the sky like God's kind of calling him. That's all he really does. So he really controls terribly. I mean, there's really no way around that. Like the zip lining is pretty okay. You can kind of game that to work in your favor. I did a few times, like when fighting people, to kind of go from one part of the area to another. I think it actually works pretty okay. But I mean, like, let's not kid ourselves about the quality of that. But the funny thing is, like, Green Goblin, probably because of the glider, I think it's inverted. At least I remember. Like, the controls are weird, but it feels pretty good. Like, him moving around, even him fighting, and his special ability being like darting, and he leaves like flames behind, or whatever the heck that ability is supposed to be. He's pretty fun. He's pretty fun to play as. So I didn't play the whole thing. I was absolutely not going to do that, but wanted to get like a little footage just to kind of understand, I guess, what that mode is. Very good. That's very clever, and you would never see that nowadays, so that obviously helps it a bit. So I think that's where we're going to leave it. An interesting game for sure. I really should have played this first to kind of like wash it down with Spider-Man 2018. Now I guess I'm going to Miles, so I feel like I'm going to be fine because I'm going back to, modern age. Again, there's something special to this game. I didn't like super enjoy playing it, but there's always going to kind of be, again, those background stories and the lore of this game and all that stuff. That's pretty interesting, at least to me. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed. Next, it's either the next video or the next Spider-Man thing we do on the channel will be Miles. Maybe I'll mix it up with other stuff first, but keep tuned to the channel, and I hope to see you all on the next video.